Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 171 review. This was a regular 2-week sprint, and we'll tell you all about it. I will provide the overview. Kavya will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, Jason on the platform, and the API. So in this sprint, we had an uptick in both number of pull requests merged, went up to 105, as well as number of pull requests opened was at 133. Those are pretty high numbers over the last 10 sprints. So that's good. I think this is a good trend. Hopefully let's continue it. As to the distribution of the pull requests, 35 were bugs, 32 enhancements, and we're getting closer and closer to cutting a Morphe beta. So we'll tell you all about it once in the upcoming sprints. With that, I'll turn it over to Kavya.
Yep, thanks, Oleg. This sprint total 18 PRs got merged into UI repos, 11 are bugs and 6 are enhancements. Next slide, please. AutoSD team contributed this enhancement. Earlier, we can only create new physical storage and physical storage, but I think they added edit as well here. Next one. This one is also added by the same team, AutoSD, and they added support for creating host initiator with multiple ports. Next slide, please. This one is part of converting Patternfly React to Carbon React, Melody converter toast notification to Carbon. Next slide, please. Here, Melody converted service request form to React and Carbon. This is also applicable for automation request page as well, so which is great. So yeah, next slide, please. Here, Gilbert converted loading symbol and grid in all pages to Carbon. This is also part of removing Patternfly React. Next slide, please. Here, fixed a bug when doc link is clicked from left nav. Doc link is opening up in another tab, but loading symbol remains in main page. So fix that issue here. Here, Gilbert fixed a bug about not saving date properly in the retirement form. Next slide, please. Here, Melody fixed a refresh functionality in service request form. It was broken before, values are not saving properly. It's hard to capture in screenshot, so I didn't add any here. Below two are cleanup PRs done by Oleg. So in the first one, he converted cloud volume operations like attach volume, detach volume, and all those things. All those actions to support feature mixing, which means that those actions are only provided for supported providers. In the below one, in the last one, he replaced to support feature mixing queryable features as it is removed. That code action names are already removed and they are added individually in the code repo pages. So he removed that in the UI classic. That's all from UI, I think. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Kavya. So the Power team added VM placement groups to advanced settings as a column that you can report on. This placement group is a way that they allow you to specify what hosts that you're going to be running the VMs on. And so it's helpful to see that in some of the reports they're going to be adding. As Kavya said, Oleg converted cloud volume operations over to support feature mixin. In addition to this core PR, there are a number of provider PRs that he added that to as well. We also added a provider's common spec test to test that the settings are valid so that we catch any invalid provider settings at the provider PR rather than having it fail later on in core. So this way the provider PR will go red if there's an invalid setting. For Amazon, we are normalizing the cloud database status column. So we are going to be adding a raw status similar to what you have for VMs for the power state, and then normalize that into consistent status for the UI to display for cloud databases. For AutoSDE, they added the ability to remove cloud volume mappings. They also added support for creating multiple host initiators in the same form. And they also added WWPN candidates, which is a way to filter down what some of the possible WWPNs can be selected for the UI when creating those volume mappings. Next slide. For VMware, so a bit of churn this sprint, kind of bittersweet. VMware has dropped support for the RB VMOMI gem, which is the primary Ruby SDK for the for interfacing with the VMware vSphere provider. Since we and a couple other projects still actively use this, we suggested that the ManageIQ community take over maintenance of this gem, and so VMware's agreed to that. And so we're going to be providing the ongoing maintenance at RB VMOMI2, going to be having a joint blog post on both the ManageIQ blog and the VMware blogs coming shortly. We're just working out the details and the wording on that. But as part of that, we added support for vSphere 7.0 update 1 and update 2. This was something which I had a PR out on RB VMOMI for a while, but they never merged it. So as soon as we got the gem forked, we added that support right away. They're coming out with an update 3 in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to try to stay on top of releasing updates to the SDK in a much more timely manner than before. So with that, we're also replacing RB VMOMI with RB VMOMI 2 in the ManageIQ provider. And so that was backported to Morphe. So Morphe will have support for VMware 7.0 update 2. Next slide. For IBM Cloud, the Power team added VM creation date to Power VS VMs. This is the date at which the VM was created on the provider, not when ManageIQ discovered it. So this can be helpful for, I think they have this in some reports that they want to show when the VM was created, not just when we found it. They also added a couple new built-in reports that was making use of the placement group that we talked about earlier. And NASA also added support for the IBM Kubernetes Service as another hosted cloud Kubernetes provider. And if we go to the next slide, he will walk us through a demo of that.
Thanks, Adam. So we start off on the container provider page, and we now have the option to add an IKS provider. We can give it a name and select the zone. In terms of SSL, we have the usual options. For this demo, I'll be choosing to use a CA. The hostname and port can be obtained from the cluster dashboard on IBM Cloud. So here is my cluster, and I've provisioned it beforehand to save some time. And here we can see the status of our nodes and other details. But for now, we are interested in getting the public endpoint URL, which can then be used to extract the host name and port. So just kind of copy that and paste the string in there, and then just take the port out of that and then format the string so that we just have the host name. Then I'll be dropping in my CA in the text box. So you can see we also need our IBM Cloud API key. The reasoning is that IKS uses IAM to authenticate, and so we use the API key to retrieve an IAM ID token. And so that lets us authenticate against our cluster. So just kind of drop that in there and click validate. So once that's validated, lastly, we need a proxy. And so I've set up a proxy for my cluster on port 8080. So just kind of add that in there. Now we can add our provider. So yeah, we see the IKS logo. It's presented there, and we can do a full refresh. So these refreshes are pretty quick, should take a few seconds. And basically, we can then see all our resources that are related to our cluster. So our pods and our nodes, containers, stuff like that. So I'm just going to quickly show some pods. Yep, so we can see some the pods we have. And I think I go through the nodes as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll pass it back to Adam.
Thanks, Naso. It's awesome. Great to see. I believe that's it for providers. Over to Jason for the platform.
Okay, on the platform side, Joe fixed an issue when deleting a worker, we leave the tasks in an active state, and then something comes along later and tries to clean up, but we know when we're deleting a worker that we can error out those tasks. So he added in a feature to do that. This goes toward his effort to deal with orphaned workers in general. EVM roles were added for physical storages by Erez on the SDE team. So there's new specific roles for administrator and for admin and user for physical storages. Adam has a PR to replace the EVM watchdog with ManageIQ DB Ready. The EVM watchdog's job was to monitor the EVM server process, and if it failed in some strange way, it would try to restart it. Now that we're moving towards systemd, that's exactly what systemd does. And so there were a couple edge cases that we had to deal with, for example, not starting until the database is ready, hence ManageIQ DB Ready. I added a PR to build the Postgres container from UBI8 with the CentOS 8 stream repos. This finishes up the work to move us completely over to CentOS stream and UBI. And finally, Brandon fixed or made a change to update us to Rails 6.0.4.1 to make sure that we get the latest CVE fixes from Rails 6.0. On the bug side, Keenan fixed a performance issue where tasks that are built around metric collection, a purge was being put on the queue at every collection, which is incredibly expensive because it would put thousands of them on the queue. Instead, we do a single purge once every so often. So I think the current time frame is once an hour. A purge is put on the queue and it puts less pressure on the queue. Joe fixed a performance issue where the hardware's information from VMs and templates was creating a complicated N+1 in the database, making it really expensive, particularly when it collects CPU, memory, and disk information. So he fixed that. And finally, Adam fixed an issue where the our evaluation of environment variables in the systemd area was incorrectly loading strings that were quoted. So he fixed that issue as a workaround, but eventually we have to fix it to deal with quoted strings. Next slide, please. On the API side, 2 bugs were fixed. Keenan fixed an issue where audit information for tasks, particularly the user ID, was passed incorrectly to different calls. Instead of passing the user ID, it was passing, which is a string that's the name of the user, it was passing the actual ID number, or actually the other way around, and he fixed it to do it correctly. And Gilbert fixed an issue where RBAC was incorrect for the 2 retirement actions on the API for instances. So he got the correct RBAC in there, and those should be working now. And that's it. Nothing on the developer side.
Cool. Thank you. And with that, this sprint comes to a close. Next sprint review is in 2 weeks. So we'll see you then. And I want to thank everyone, the speakers, the contributors, and the whole ManageIQ community for making the sprint possible. Thanks, everyone.